Hello everyone, and welcome to this special showcase video of Derail Valley Simulator. Before we get started, I would like to thank the developers for providing me with a key. Up until recently, the game was known as Derail Valley Overhaul, but after the recent update, the developers changed the name slightly, so it better represents the current state of the game. We will go over all the big changes that came with that update, but before we get into it, let's go over what the game is about, for the benefit of those who are not familiar with it. In Derail Valley Simulator, you play as a train driver, and you need to do all sorts of jobs around the game's colossal map, delivering cargo, shunting wagons around in stations, and assembling trains to get them ready for a delivery. What makes this game so special is that it was built from the ground up with VR in mind. Every interaction you can do in the game world is done by interacting with physical objects. Want to apply throttle? Better grab that lever, and move it yourself. Want to connect new cars to your train? You will need to jump out of the cab, connect the hook, tighten the line, and don't forget to connect the brake line hoses, and always make sure the valves are open. Want to pick up a job? There they are on the table. Grab them, study them, and once you made your choice, put the paper in the job validation machine, which will give you a small booklet, with all the information you need to complete the job. And let me tell you, if you think this looked immersive, wait until you give it a try in actual VR. I don't have footage of that in action, but I'll be honest, it is one of the best VR experiences I ever played. One of the more peculiar things that got carried over to the non-VR version of the game is the ability to teleport. If you're familiar with VR titles, you will know that one of the most widely used mode of movement in those games is a kind of teleport, since that alleviates the motion sickness people are prone to while moving around in VR. And that feature is also available in the non-VR version here. And it is incredibly useful. There are times when you want to check ahead of the train's path, to make sure switches are set correctly, so you can get where you need to go. At those times, that teleport function comes in handy. There are a few different kinds of jobs you can do in the game, including simple deliveries, from one station to another, but you can also work by shunting cars around inside stations, or assembling whole trains to get them ready for a delivery later. And these stations can be quite massive. During the tutorial, you will get your hands on a big booklet, with each page showing a diagram of the track layouts of each station. You can check the overall picture, and see where individual loading, unloading, parking, and other platforms are located, but if you turn the page, you will encounter the diagrams for those individual areas too. Just make sure you pay close attention to the direction indicators when planning your route. If the job tells you to deliver your wagons to platform C3I, then you damn well make sure you deliver those wagons to C3I, or you will fail. And the time requirements can be a bit strict too, especially for a beginner, so when you pick up a job, you might want to plan ahead. Find the cars in advance, maybe even park your locomotive there. To be able to make it in time to get the bonus, you will need to be prepared. Simply getting around the stations can be time consuming all by itself, especially if you are not familiar with the track diagrams yet. Once you get out of the station, and begin your journey to the destination, the learning doesn't stop. You will encounter all sorts of signposts along the way, and you better pay close attention to them, or you might get into some sticky situations. For example, speed signs are divided by 10, so they are easier to discern at a distance. Just keep in mind that if you see a big 6 in a red circle, that means you need to stay below 60 km per hour with your train. And better well do it, speed limits are very important here. This game is called Derail Valley for a reason. If you are too cavalier with the speed of your train, you will get in trouble. Sometimes there is a bit of leeway, and might get away with going at 45 if the sign says 4, but there are points on the map where even slightly going over the limit is a guaranteed derailment. And don't forget that you are not just the locomotive. You have cars behind you, and even if the front of the train is past the slow speed zone, the back might not be, and speeding up will make those cars leave the tracks. There are a lot of other intricacies to the game that are too much to go into detail here. I could spend minutes talking about the insurance system, or the whole progression ladder you will need to climb to unlock everything, or I could do what the YouTuber Squirrel did, and spend 20+ minutes only talking about the ins and outs of the different braking methods employed by the different locomotives in the game. Incidentally, if you want to see just how deeply the game goes into these kinds of details, feel free to check out his videos on the game, they are incredibly informative. Although, according to my analytics, I don't think I need to tell you who Squirrel is. But enough about that. We are here to see what the new update is all about, and let me tell you, this is a big one. There are 3 broad categories which they go into, and the developers provided these handy lists for us to peruse. We are going to start with this, the one about user experience. The most obvious change is the new interface. While driving a train, you bring it up by pressing the driving UI button while in mouse cursor mode. It is an alternative to the old system, where you had to look at different dials in the actual game world, and depending on your eyesight, that might have been a bit hard. Now, we have a nice clean interface, all easily operated by the mouse. You can drag the sliders, or just use the middle scroller to adjust them to your liking. I have a feeling that this is a placeholder for something a bit more fancy later on, but it is perfectly functional. And it comes in quite handy when it comes to another improvement added, namely the external camera. You can access it by either pressing F2, or by clicking on the camera icon. In this mode, you can easily deal with maneuvering around stations, connecting cars, and just have a better situational awareness in general. There are many other new features, like the sandbox mode, save management, and the user manual accessible in the pause menu, but what should be emphasized is the new inventory. You can find it by clicking on the little backpack icon in the usual place. Before, we only had a couple hotbar slots to use for this, but now we have a lot more space to hold our stuff. But more importantly, we can now lock certain hotbar slots, so whatever you put there, that is what you will get. Before, it was a bit of a weird system that took some time to get used to. Now it's much more comfortable. Moving on to the overall graphical and audio presentation, there are a lot of improvements. The first one is what you will most likely encounter before any of the others. A new day-night cycle. Gone are the days of constant sunshine. As you play the game, the sun will slowly make its way across the sky, and you will need to start using some of the different lighting options available to you, like train headlights, a handheld torch, maybe a lantern, or even a simple lighter will do in a pinch. Then there's the brand new weather system. Before, it was sunny all the time. Not anymore. Now we have a couple new environmental factors to deal with. It can be overcast, with barely any sun making it through the thick cloud coverage. Or it can be foggy, lowering visibility. Since we need to see quite far ahead of the train to see the different signs along the tracks, this one can be quite dangerous. Then there's rain. This one can be even more hazardous, since water makes the rails lose traction, increasing the likelihood of the wheels slipping. But hey, it is quite pretty, so it's not all bad news. And put them all together, including the darkness of night, and you can end up in a situation that will really put your train driving skills to the test. But it's not just visuals that have been updated. We also have a myriad of new sounds, especially around the stations. While you are still the only character on the map right now, there are sounds all over the place that gives the illusion of activity and life. Here, have a listen. The last category of upgrades coming in the simulator patch are related to the trains themselves. The most obvious is the new trains added. Previously, we had 3 locomotives to choose from, the DE2 shunter, the DE6 diesel engine, and the SH282 steam locomotive, but now we have 2 more diesel engines to play with. The DH4, which uses a diesel hydraulic system, and the DM3, a diesel mechanical engine. I am not even remotely qualified to talk about all the ins and outs of these beasts, but if you want an in-depth rundown, I can once more recommend the videos made by Squirrel. He goes into the nitty-gritty of what makes these machines unique. The overall physics have also been improved quite a bit. Previously, the trains felt a bit stiff while running on the tracks, but they had their suspensions updated, and the connections between the cars are also behaving more believably. As for the old Locos, they also had their mechanics brought up to date. As of making this video, I only had the opportunity to give the old starter engine, the DE2 a try, and it is already more forgiving than it was before. Previously, the engine temperatures were tied directly to the amount of power applied to the wheels. Now it's more complex, which resulted in much more leeway when it comes to overheating. Don't get me wrong, you will still run the risk of blowing the engine if you run it on max for too long, but not nearly as much as it did before the update. There are a lot of other smaller changes in this update, and they are too numerous for this short showcase video to go into. If you're interested, you will find a link to the news post on Steam down below, where you can find those lists I used earlier in the video. And if you want to look at some of these changes in a much more in-depth fashion, I will also post the link to the preview videos made by Squirrel in the description, where you can find some truly fascinating insight into the inner workings of the trains in the game. And once again, I would like to say thank you to the developers for giving me a key to give this game a try. Please take that into consideration. I can only hope that it didn't color my opinion too much, but for full disclosure, I thought you should know that I got the key for free. I had a good month to try my hands on the old version, and it was already quite an enjoyable and relaxing game to play. But with these new additions, it's even better. If you thought this is something that you would be interested in, you will find a link to the game's Steam page in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.